I think one thing people don't realise is teams in Europe, their offenses are 10 times better than the NBA offense just because they move around a lot. A lot of movement and not as much talent, so they have to do different things to be able to score the basketball. I think it was a good experience for us to be able to go to Europe and be able to guard those offenses and some of the best teams. That's always good for us.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and as always you can follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Yeah, go ahead and do that. We are, as I said, brought to you by Fantrax, and if you're looking for some cash leagues, Fantrax has opened up their cash leagues, just points leagues at the moment, but they are doing head-to-head and roto leagues. They should be up pretty soon. They might be up even by the time you're listening to this podcast. So check out Fantrax if you're looking for any types of cash leagues. I guess and you know what Fantrax is. It's a great site to go and host your league. So many options, so many different things that you can do. Any keeper or dynasty format that you're in, Fantrax is definitely going to be the best place for you to go and host your league. What we're doing in today's podcast is we're looking at the Eastern Conference. So we're going to be looking at the Eastern Conference and we're looking at what's been happening so far in the preseason in the Eastern Conference. There's been a couple of games, some teams one game, some teams have played 3 games, just to see if there's anything that's sort of standing out. If there's something that's, this is something we need to pay attention to, this is something we should be just keeping a mental note of, just that sort of thing. Because some stuff that happens in preseason means nothing. Some stuff that happens in preseason is really predictive of what might happen in the regular season, especially in terms of breakout performances or coaches' rotations or play style of the team or role of a certain player. Again, we don't know any of this stuff exactly yet, but there are a few little things that have happened. So I'm going to go through all 15 Eastern Conference teams. Tomorrow I'm going to do the Western Conference teams and just talk about exactly what we've seen so far in preseason for these teams. So
let's get to it.
Good idea. The Atlanta Hawks, we'll start with them. Look, not much to see out of Schroeder. I'm still really high on him. He played one game. He's got a sore ankle. He sat out the second one. He was fine. 9 points, 3 assists in 17 minutes. I don't think you can expect too much more from him there. The biggest probably takeaway, I think, from Atlanta has been the form of Eddie Tavares, who is averaging almost 9 rebounds a game across his 2 games and shooting 77% from the field. He's obviously really, really tall. He hasn't really had one of those big games where he's blocked a lot of shots yet, but that's going to come from him. And with Thiago Splitter suffering all his injury problems over the last season, we haven't seen him yet this year. And Tavares should be the 3rd center this year, and there's a chance that maybe he moves into the backup center role. Now, Chris Humphries is also there as well. I don't think that Mike Muscala is going to be on the roster come opening night. So the way that Tavares is playing, the fact that they're playing 24 minutes a night on average across these 2 games, it makes me think that they want to start using him a little bit more, and if Splitter's not right, they'll go with him in a, say, 16, 17-minute role behind Dwight Howard. That means for you deeper league guys, Tavares is definitely on the radar because his game is pretty interesting fantasy-wise. He's not a bad free throw shooter. Yes, he's only 50% from the line in preseason, but I think he was a 70% guy through the D-League last year. He blocks shots, he gets high rebounds, he finishes off because he's 7'3", so he might get you, if he played 30 minutes, you might get 10, 11 points out of him, almost a Rudy Gobert sort of player. Now, he's not the same level of defender as Gobert, but he's longer. He blocks shots. He does a similar sort of things offensively as what Gobert can do. So Eddie Tavares is definitely a name to keep in mind for the deeper sort of formats. Malcolm Delaney, I've been big on him as the backup point guard on this team. I think that he is the backup over Jarrett Jack. He started game 2. He looked pretty solid as well. He's going to be that deeper league guy that you can get for some scoring and from assists, almost playing a similar role to what Schroeder did last season. Now, I don't think he's going to play the same minutes as what Schroeder did last season and have that situation where Dennis would play the last quarter and Teague would sit out entirely. I don't think that's going to be something that happens, but I think that Delaney does have a significant role. Both rookies have looked good, DeAndre Bembry and Taurean Prince. Prince probably looked a little bit better, but nothing that's making me think they're immediately cracking the rotation, although Tim Hardaway Jr. was shitful, basically, so maybe one of them could take some of his minutes. But Bembry doing his thing in passing the ball and handling the ball, Prince has been awesome. He's averaging 3 steals across his 2 games in that sense. But I don't think this really makes me go, oh, look at these guys. We need to grab them. They're not taking over from Corver, who shot the ball well. They're not taking over from Bazemore, who I still don't believe is a great player. But they're looking decent in terms of dynasty value for those guys. Let's look at the Brooklyn Nets now, and probably the biggest takeaway from Brooklyn, well, maybe it's not the biggest takeaway, it is to me, is the play of Jeremy Lin. Lin is a guy that I've been pretty high on this offseason. You would know that. He played 1 game, but he was awesome in that game. Now, it depends on what league you're in. His ADP is around 90-ish, that sort of spot, 80-ish. If you can get him there, it's an absolute steal. In most competitive leagues, and if you're against people who listen to this podcast or other podcasts, you know what? That's not true. If you're in a league with people who listen to this podcast, they'll probably go with him at 60, 70. Because some other podcasters, some other people are going, oh, Lin, he's a good pick around the hundreds. I think that is ridiculous to me. I guess we'll see how it all pans out in the end, but to me, it's ridiculous to think that you can get him that late in his first game. And again, he's not going to do this every game. I'm not that stupid to think he's going to score 21 points in 17 minutes and have a 36% usage. But he hit 5 triples. He got a steal. I think getting 16 to 17 points and 7 assists out of him is pretty realistic. 1.5 steals, 1.5 threes. Really, really like what Lin's going to do. Now, the Nets are starting Randy Foy ahead of Bojan Bogdanovic. Now, I'm not sure if that's going to run through the entire season. They've said they want to ease Bogdanovic back in after a heavy workload over the summer. We'll see exactly if they do that or not, or if they're just going to run Bogdanovic in this bench role. It sort of does lessen the appeal somewhat of Bogdanovic. It doesn't increase Foy's appeal. I don't think that he should be drafted in any sort of situation. But if Bogdanovic, instead of playing 32 minutes, plays 29 minutes, then he's already a borderline guy anyway, because he's basically a scoring and 3 sort of player. He doesn't do anything in the other areas. And if he's playing off the bench, then what sort of benefit is, or if he's getting 3 less minutes, how is that? That's not really going to benefit you. Obviously, we've seen Trevor Booker start at power forward. It looks like that's going to be the way that they go. Anthony Bennett showed a little bit of a flash. He's a very deep league guy to keep an eye on. Booker's more of a 14 to 16 teamer. Luis Scola a little bit deeper, and Chris McCullough's struggled in his first 2 games, and he is a guy that I am interested in. McCullough, his steals and blocks ability is important, but we haven't seen that happen just yet for him. It could very well happen, but we haven't seen it happen yet. So let's just hold off on him. And he's more of a guy, I think, that when we get to January, February, that McCullough is going to be a player that interests us in fantasy just around that time frame. But we're not there yet, obviously. The next team we'll go take a look at is the Boston Celtics. They've played quite a number of games, and there's some interesting things to look at. Just quickly on Boston, I tweeted out today, so you can go and check it out on Twitter. I tweeted out Ante Zizic, who was their first-round pick, who you know that I've been very high on and was extremely high on before the draft. He had a 37-20 game. I think that's right. Let me double-check, because the tweet just came out and I just retweeted it before I started recording. Just need to go and find that now. Sorry, I'm sure this is great. Here we go. He had 37 points and 20 rebounds in his last game in Europe. So that's obviously a huge performance from Zizic. I don't know where he fits into Boston and when he comes over, but deep dynasty stashes, you do have to look at him. Okay, so on to the Celtics. The key thing for me is something I've really been looking at is Marcus Smart. He's hit 50% of his shots in all 3 games so far. We've heard Brad Stevens come out say he's our 6th starter. I think that 30 minutes should be an absolute lock for him. He's averaging in 23 minutes, only 9 points, but you're not drafting him for points. 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.7 steals. Hasn't missed a free throw. He's only attempted 1. Cool, but 50% from the field is a benefit. He's almost at a 3 a game. I'm liking what I see from Smart. The field goal percentage has always been his detriment. I think he's a really nice late pick. Just bear in mind, though, that you are going to have to absorb that field goal percentage hit. It might not be as bad as what it's been in previous seasons, but I still think it will still be there, and there'll still be some concerns with it. I don't think he's automatically going from a 35% shooter to a 50% shooter. 40, 41, yeah, it's possible, and that's a difference between 35 and 41. It's a significant difference. It's not a crippling percentage, but he's been good. Al Horford's looked awesome. Nothing to be concerned about with him. Isaiah Thomas has looked good. Terry Rozier has looked solid. Jaylen Brown has looked good, but In terms of him cracking enough minutes to be standard league relevant, I just don't really see that happening for him just at this point. But he's looked okay. He's also looked like a rookie in stretches. His shot hasn't fallen as well as he might have liked, but he is going to be a rotation player, no doubt, and he's going to be a deep league contributor. But his numbers don't translate great for fantasy, so that's something we obviously do have to pay attention to. The Charlotte Hornets. We haven't seen Cody Zeller, and it's a little bit of a worry with Zeller with his knee bone bruise. He might not start the season, so that means we're going to be getting Roy Hibbert, and that's not exciting for anybody. Hibbert, though, he's blocked a shot a game in the 3 games so far, 7 rebounds, which is high for him, but as per usual, less than 38% from the field, high free throw percentage. You know what you're getting from Hibbert. It could be that he's valuable for a month, maybe. But even then, I think he's really borderline valuable because he just doesn't do enough. So despite the fact that Zeller's out, I still don't mind him as a late pick and see where it goes. But Hibbert is not someone that's very appealing to me. Frank Kaminsky's looked good. 11 and 8 he's averaged across the 3 games. Maybe he takes some of those minutes with Zeller out. I think he probably will. Good to see Kemba Walker back on the floor. Nothing to be concerned about there at this point, thankfully. Batum has looked solid. Really not a lot to really look at. Kid Gilchrist hasn't hit 42% of his threes, shockingly. I know, that's what he did last year, but importantly to me, he's still attempting 1 per game after 2014-15, where he didn't attempt a single 3 for the entire season. Now, he was at, I think, 1.3 attempts last season games, so at least the confidence is there for him to take the shots. Again, he's only hit 31% of his total shots this preseason, but he's taking those shots, so there is more confidence there. He's looked a little bit down, but I still do like him as a late pick in this upcoming season or for your upcoming drafts. Now, the Chicago Bulls. Where do I start with the Bulls? You know that I've had issues with Dwayne Wade. You know that I've had issues with Rajon Rondo. I don't think that's any secret. Let's start with probably the biggest concern that people had with the Bulls, and that is the play of Nikola Mirotic. He was dreadful in the first 2 games in terms of his shooting, like really poor. He was at 14%, 2 of 14 from the field. That's horrible. It's horrible stuff. But he looked a lot better in the next game, which was the 3rd game. But even in those first 2 games, he still got half a steal a game. He still got 1.5 blocks a game. He didn't miss a free throw, so he was still doing those other things. Then in the next game, the 3rd game against the Pacers, he did what we know he can do, and I think that's important. It was important for his confidence, important for us to see. He hit 4 threes. He was 6 of 9 from the field. He got a steal. He got a block. He did all those things that were necessary for him. Now, in terms of the risk associated with Mirotic, there's a little bit of a risk associated with drafting him because Hoiberg, I have zero confidence in him doing or him knowing what he's doing really, in terms of the rotation and Taj Gibson and that sort of stuff. And Gibson's been impressive too, but putting Gibson in with Butler, Wade, Rondo, Lopez, there's just no ability to shoot or no ability to space the floor whatsoever. Mirotic allows that. So Mirotic, we don't have him projected for 30 minutes. We've got him under 30 minutes. I think you get him in the 70s or 80s with big possibility. I think that's worthwhile because he does get steals, he does get blocks, he does rebound, he shoots his free throws well, and he hits threes. And he is going to have to be relied upon to some degree to do what he needs to do. Dwayne Wade's hitting threes. I don't really understand what's happening with Wade and why he is hitting these threes. He's gone 5 of 7 from 3 in the 3 games so far. Last season, 3.7% of Dwayne Wade's shot attempts were 3-pointers. In the preseason, he's at 27%. Do I magically think that he's a great 3-point shooter now? Do I magically think that all of a sudden this is just a huge part of his game? No, but he has talked about, I'm going to shoot threes, and he's done it so far. So we have to imagine that he's going to at least shoot more than 3.7 of his attempts from 3-point land this season. I don't think there's any reason we think that he stays at that low percentage. He should increase what he does. Does he hit them at a 5 for 7 rate? Yeah, probably not. He's not going at 50, 60% from 3. Nobody's doing that. Not even Steph Curry does that. But I think we have to assume that Wade would at least take more. Whether they go in or not, whether he shoots more than the 30% that he shot throughout his career, remains to be seen. But he is taking more of them. I'm still worried about Wade with minutes, with injuries. He's a fine late pick, but he's nothing to really get excited about. I think that's probably the best way of framing that. Let's look at the Cleveland Cavaliers now. There's not really a huge amount to gain from the Cavs. The best thing that I can tell you, though, from the Cavs is Jordan McRae. 20 points in both of his games, so that's obviously a huge amount of scoring for McRae. He does play the point guard a little bit as well. So with Mo Williams gone, with no J.R. Smith there as well, he's getting up shots. Now, Kay Felder's looked pretty solid, but McRae has definitely played himself, I think, into at least a semi part of the rotation. In his 2 games, McRae, he's averaging 26 and 4.5 assists, shooting 52% on 1.5 threes. With 1.5 threes. Like, they're ridiculous numbers. He's hitting 75% of his threes. Like, these are things that are not going to happen. But he's played well enough to think that he will remain in the rotation and he could be the backup point guard. He does play point guard a little bit. He could be that. And he could be a point guard in the same way that Dellavedova was a point guard last season, alongside LeBron in the second unit, and be just a scoring guy. Look, his defense does need some work. It's not great, but he's able to hit some threes. He's able to score, and that could be useful. So Jordy McRae for your deeper leagues, I think you need to pay attention. Kay Felder was also solid, 9, 2.5, 2.5. They're okay numbers in 22 minutes, but McRae is definitely challenging for some of that playing time for this upcoming season. I think that we've seen that so far. He's looking more comfortable, and it might finally be the chance that he's been sort of looking for, I guess, throughout his career to solidify himself. Iman Shumpert's been starting with Smith out. Not much to really like about Shumpert for fantasy. I don't care. Even if he starts, if Smith's gone, yes, cool. Someone else can deal with him, unless you're talking 16 teamers. He just does nothing in that role. Detroit Pistons, the Reggie Jackson news is not ideal. Spoke about that in the last 2 podcasts with Kyle and Matt. Won't get too much into that. Ish Smith has started for him. I don't think he's an automatic, I must add this guy, just because of the deficiencies that he can have, and it could affect really what your team wants to do. But have a look. Do you want... he's not going to be the same guy with such a sky-high usage as he was in Philadelphia. So the assists, the scoring won't be the same, but the percentages will still be pretty bad. And we heard Stan Van Gundy come out today and say we want to run more offense through Marcus Morris and through Toby Harris while Reggie Jackson is out. So, Ish Smith I don't think is going to be a great option there. Reggie Bullock has looked pretty solid in his one game. He's obviously ahead of Darren Healy and Michael Bineji for that backup 2-guard role, so he's a very deep league sort of player. Andre Drummond grabbed 21 rebounds in 24 minutes, is still an animal, still 1 of 3 from the free throw line. Nothing changes for Drummond in that sort of a sense. Overall, looking at the Pistons, not anything really all that interesting, I don't think, with them in preseason. Let's talk about the Indiana Pacers. Here, Jeff Teague looked pretty good.
My name is Jeff.
He had 21 points in the third game, but it was without Paul George. So, just look at that and go, he had 21 points, which is great. It was without Paul George. Now, he's been solid in those other games. I still think he's a nice 60 to 80 range point guard in that sort of an area. If you're looking for point guards, you grab him. But I still have him behind Schroeder, behind D'Angelo Russell, behind Jeremy Lin, Mike Conley, Goran Dragic in that mid-round point guard range. That's sort of where I have him. Now, Thad Young has been an interesting player. In the first 2 games, he rebounded fantastically. He averaged 9 boards, a half a steal, half a block. Then he played next to Miles Turner, and he got 3 rebounds. So we saw last season his rebounding total went way up. But previously, he'd been getting 6 rebounds a game in all the other seasons. He was up to 9 last year playing with Brook Lopez. Now, which one is it? He's going to be definitely spending more time at the 3-point line. His 3-point attempts in the preseason are double what they were last season in terms of a per-game average from 0.3 to 0.7. So he's obviously taking more threes. That takes him a little bit more out of the paint. And Turner's a better rebounder than what Brook Lopez is. And probably not as good of a box-out guy as what Lopez is. So the 9 rebounds in the first 2 games were impressive. But I don't think that he's going to average the same rebounds as last season. I do think that he drops off, probably not down to the 6 rebounds he was in Philadelphia or in that first season in Brooklyn, but down a bit from the 9 rebounds. And again, we saw what he can do, just the 3 boards in that game with Turner. Glenn Robinson, the third, has looked good, but I don't really think that should impact much. And Al Jefferson has scored the ball really well, averaging over in double digits. But I just don't think that the scoring's been good. Yep, the field goal percentage has been good. Not a lot happening in the other categories, and he's just not going to get enough minutes for him to be someone that I'm super excited about. He's a decent option in deeper leagues. Fine if you want to grab him with your last pick, but I think he's going to be shuttled on and off of waiver wires. He's just not going to get enough minutes for me to be overly excited there. I have liked Joe Young though. Mighty Joe Young's been good for this team. I thought he's looked pretty decent in the time that we've seen him out there so far, and that's good. He's in his second year. Aaron Brooks is hurt at the moment, so he's taking up some of the slack there, which is always a good thing when these second year players start to take a step forward. I also love that they started Kevin Seraphin with Miles Turner out. He's obviously going to be the third string centre behind Turner, behind Jefferson, but I do like Seraphin, as you probably well know by listening to this podcast. The Miami Heat will look at Hassan Whiteside. Looks like an animal so far. We saw at the end of last season, post All-Star break, he only played like 29 minutes a game, but he upped his output without Chris Bosh there. His offensive output was tremendous. He's averaging 18.5 and 12.5 with 3 blocks in under 25 minutes, shooting 73% from the field. These are crazy numbers. The problem is he's gone 5 of 10 from the free throw line. Now that is pre-All-Star break Hassan Whiteside. Post, he was a 75% shooter. So we saw that for 2-3 months, well, basically 3 months, we saw him being an over 70% free throw shooter. So I'm not overly worried, but I am a little bit concerned. So with him, you do need to, I don't think it stays at 50, you do need to make sure that you're not relying on him to be a 75% shooter. We've got him projected at about 70. I think that's right, but there's obviously downside. There's risk that he goes to a 65% shooter. And can you deal with that? Can you absorb that? I think that he'll be fine with the free throw shooting. Everything else looks fantastic, but that is a concern with Whiteside. I think he's a first-round player without pretty much any doubt in my mind whatsoever. Josh Richardson hasn't played yet, which is not great, but he looks like he'll be back for opening night. Dion Waiters and Tyler Johnson have been replacing him. They haven't really done a huge amount to get me excited. Waiters has been alright though. He's averaged 7 assists across the 2 games, 13 points, 3 steals. Actually, that's more than alright. That's really good, but it's Dion Waiters. Want to grab him with your last pick? Sure. I don't think it will really last in that spot. Luke Babbitt had a nice start and then a stinker. Derek Williams is scoring the ball okay, replacing Chris Bosh. These guys are still just deeper league sort of targets. Nothing to get me overly excited, and nothing to really report from what we've seen from Goran Dragic so far. The Milwaukee Bucks. Rashad Vaughn's just really bad. I still don't understand what Jason Kidd is doing. I know that Jason Kidd has a penchant for starting just bad players. It just shouldn't happen. Vaughn only played 1 game. He scored 4 points in 22 minutes. He was 1 of 7 from the field. I know some people believe in Vaughn. I just don't. I cannot see it happening with him. Not interested at all. Jabari Parker's looked really good. I think he's a nice mid-round player. You know you're not going to get great defensive numbers, especially blocks, but I think his field goal percentage will be okay. I think his scoring will be good. Hopefully his rebounding goes up as well. I'm excited to see what he can do. Dellavedova, averaging 5.5 assists. I think that we can look at him as definitely a late pick. No problem with that whatsoever. And Malcolm Brogdon's averaging 3.5 assists in his 2 games. He's more of a deeper league guy. I would definitely be picking him ahead of Rashad Vaughn. Absolutely zero doubt in my mind. He's a better player. And at some point, Kidd started Johnny O'Brien for 15 games in his rookie season. And then he went, you know what? Maybe I'm a dickhead. Maybe I shouldn't be starting this guy who shouldn't be in the league. And moved away from it. As a lot of these coaches, some of them don't. A lot of these coaches will start someone. They'll try to be cute. Oh, let's start player X who's crap. And then they go, you know what, he's actually really bad, and not only should he not be starting, he should not be playing at all in the rotation, and that could be something that happens to Vaughn, and that could elevate Brogdon. So he's not a standard league guy by any stretch, but he's someone to watch. The concern here is a little bit of Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's averaging just 2 assists a game in 24 minutes. The ball's been in Dellavedova's hands, it's been in Brogdon's hands, it's been in Carter Williams' hands. Not panicking on Antetokounmpo yet, but it's not great. It hasn't been a great start. He's only shooting 38% from the field and 67% from the line. The free throw percentage is something we knew to be a concern heading into the season, and that given the amount of times he gets to the line, it's almost at a punt territory. It's not quite, but he definitely facilitates a punt. But if he's not going to get those assists, it is a concern. So let's see what happens in the next couple of games. But it is a little bit of a worry. Greggy Monroe has scored really well. 13.5 points, 7 rebounds in just 18 minutes a night. But the problem with him, like when I spoke about Al Jefferson, I just don't see him getting enough minutes to really repay that ADP of 60 to 70. Yeah, at pick 100, knock yourself out. I think it's a great value, but I just don't see it being worthwhile at that sort of an ADP range. Thonmaker also looked pretty solid in his game, but I think it's going to be pretty hard for him to crack the rotation, whereas John Henson, Miles Plumlee, they're going to get minutes, but they're not going to do enough for me to be overly interested in what we're going to see from them this season. But Plumlee, not a bad deeper league sort of player. Henson, obviously, we know what he can do with his block ability too. The New York Knicks, Porzingis. He looked pretty good. He looked really good in that first game. Hit 5 triples. Wasn't quite as good in the second performance, but still impressive enough for me to be pretty confident. I picked him. I just did a draft before this podcast. I had the number 1 pick, and then at pick 24, I picked Porzingis to pair with Harden. I think he's still going to be really useful. In 23 minutes, he's averaging 17 and 5, 1.5 blocks, 2.5 threes. I don't imagine he shoots 60% from the field in the season, but I think we see an improvement there. I think we see more minutes. I'm really excited. Derrick Rose looked all right as well in his first game, but there's obviously, you might have some moral issues with drafting Derrick Rose. And how does his body hold up? How does his mind hold up? There's lots of question marks with Rose. No issues with Melo. Billy Hernan-Gomez has looked really good. In a backup role, obviously, but 8 and 3.5 is pretty solid. He's not a defensive big. He's a scoring guy who gets rebounds and he's pretty efficient. But deeper league guys will want to pay attention to that. Not much else to pay attention to really here. Brandon Jennings has looked alright, 4.5 assists. I don't even mind drafting Brandon Jennings with the last pick in a standard league just for his assists. And we know that when he gets starts, the numbers will come. But he's also going to torpedo your field goal percentage. Nothing is going to change in that area. So he might be a let's draft him with the last pick and move on, because I need something else or I need another player. He's going to be around that zone unless Rose is out for long term, which is not something that I think we should be looking at as being all that unlikely. The Orlando Magic. The front court, it's the big question. And the answer is we don't know. We haven't seen Serge Ibaka yet. We haven't seen Aaron Gordon yet. So we've been getting a starting combination of Bismack Biyombo and Nick Vucevic. And they're doing what they do. Biyombo's been dreadful on offense. Vucevic has been average on defense. He's been scoring. Biyombo's been rebounding and blocking shots. Exactly what you expect from these guys. But not enough for me to go, Vuce, you're back to being a top 30 guy. Biyombo, let's grab him at 80 because we've got to put Ibaka back into this lineup. We've got to put Aaron Gordon back into this lineup. How does that all work? Do Vucevic and Biyombo continue to start? Absolutely not. Ibaka's going to start over one of those guys. Which one? I don't know. I would imagine he starts over Biyombo. And what does that do for Vucevic? Does Vucevic then play 28, 29 minutes a game, which is what we got him projected at? Or does he still go 31, 32 and Biyombo plays 18? That's the common sense move to me, but I didn't just pay $72 million to have Bismack Biyombo on my team. So we'll see how the Magic run it, but absolutely zero can be gained from rotations from these early part. One thing we can gain is that Evan Fournier is going to be the offensive focus of this team. He's averaging 16 points in 22 minutes, shooting efficiently, and yes, 67% is high, but he is a very, very high percentage field goal guy for a guard who takes a lot of shots. So take that on board. I love him around the 50 mark this season. I think he's going to be really good. Mario Hezonja has been a little bit up and down. He's a 14 to 16 team league guy. Very interesting in that sort of a range. And I don't hate DJ Augustine. Now, I've drafted Elfrid Payton in a few formats so far this season, but Augustine has an ability to, not to usurp value, maybe that is the right word. He has an ability to take away value from people. Just, maybe Payton doesn't play 32, maybe Payton plays 28 and Augustine plays 20 because he's playing so well. Let's see how it works out, but Augustine will be a really handy stream option for 4 assists, 1.5 threes, 12 points, that sort of thing. I think at times throughout the season. It won't be every week, obviously, but it is something that I think that he can do. The Philadelphia 76ers, I admit I've watched every single game of the Sixers throughout preseason, and it's because of one man. It's because of Joel Embiid. We want to see what he can do, and we can see the talent. It's oozing there. He's been rusty at times. He's on a 12-minute limit at the moment. He's blocking shots. He's legit hitting threes. He's grabbing rebounds. But overall, look, he's only shooting 36% from the floor. It's not a great amount, obviously. In his 13 minutes, he's at 8 points, 4 rebounds, 1.3 blocks. The shot blocking's there. The usage at 35%, probably not going to stick. I don't hate getting Embiid with a late pick, but the ability or the probability that he sits out back-to-backs, which is 17 of them the Sixers have got this year, It's a lot of games. It takes you down to 65 games already. The fact that he might be limited to 20 minutes a game worries me as well. What do we get out of him? Fine to draft him, but in the end, I don't think you'll stick with him in that position unless just they completely abandon their plan or their process, as it were, and move on from there. Nerlens Noel, Julie Okafor, much like Orlando, who knows? Like, we don't know what's going to happen because Noel's played one game and then strained his groin. Okafor we haven't seen yet, but Embiid's the starter. It's almost no doubt that Embiid is the starter. So where does that leave Noel? Where does that leave Okafor? I still like Noel, but it pushes him into the 70s sort of range, I think. Okafor is very late, but how are these guys going to get minutes? Now, maybe the fact that Simmons is out enables them to play at the 4, but it was a disaster having Noel and Okafor at the 4 last season. And especially with the way that Dario Saric is playing, he's going to get the majority of Simmons' minutes at the 4. So, and Jeremy Grant's playing well as well at the 4. So I don't really see them going much Okafor. And yeah, there'll be a couple of minutes there, but I don't think it's going to work out all that well for these guys in that sort of position. But let's see, I guess. We'll see how it all works out. As for Saric, love picking him. Once the pick counter goes over 100, grab him. He's going to play pretty decent minutes. He's hitting threes at a nice rate. He'll get some assists, more than he's got so far. His passing has looked really nice. Steals are up. Scoring's there. I love Saric in these late rounds. Again, once it gets to pick 100, I'm fine with it. And see how it goes. Just in that draft that I just did before, Ben Simmons, I had the first pick in the draft. We went 14 rounds, and I also had the last pick in the draft. I got Ben Simmons with the last pick in the draft, pick 168. I know that he might not play, well, he's not going to play the first 3 months, or first 2 months. He's out for 3 months. He might not play the first 2 months of the season. I know that. I know that there's a rumor he might not play at all this season. But at pick 168, I don't really think I can go wrong in that sort of a situation. Richaun Holmes has looked really good. But the problem for him is minutes. He's averaging 25 a game through the preseason, 16-7 with 1.3 steals and 1.7 blocks. Crazy numbers. 92% from the line, 66 from the field. You know that I love Holmes, but how is he getting minutes? Great deep dynasty stash, no doubt, but I just don't see the playing time for him, unfortunately, which is an issue because he is going to be a significant contributor if he could get that playing time. Bob Cove is still launching threes, no issue there. Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot has been okay, but nothing that makes me think that he's going to be a contributor this season in standard leagues. No Jared Bayless, and his absence may last into the regular season. He's dealing with a wrist sprain, so we've seen TJ McConnell get the start, but the more impressive guy, I think, has been Sergio Rodriguez, who's averaging 6.3 assists. McConnell's been good, almost at 5 assists with 2 steals. That's good, but Rodriguez, I think, is the guy that will be the secondary point guard, whereas McConnell will be the third guy, unless they just decide not to run with Bayless really much at all, which I don't think that'll be the case, but we'll see. None of these guys, Bayless, McConnell, Rodriguez, really scream out to me as being standard league sort of players, but I wouldn't hate getting Rodriguez with a last pick just because maybe I get 5 assists a game out of him, which can be really useful in leagues that are standard leagues even, because he might not do anything else, but getting those sort of assists, it's really hard to get them in any sort of other area. The Toronto Raptors, the biggest probably story out of the Raptors is the play of Pascal Siakam. He's played more minutes than Jakob Poeltl. He's played more minutes than Bebe Nogueira. He's played backup 5, backup 4. He's looked okay. He looked good in one game and then poor in other games. Does it mean I want to draft him in the standard league? No, I do not. I think that, look, in a deeper league, yeah, you pay some attention to him, but I don't think there's going to be a huge amount for him. And Nogueira is still the guy I think is going to be that backup center along with Sullinger. Yeah, Siakam will play a little bit there, but overall, nothing that's making me change my mind about these guys too much. Terrence Ross has outplayed Norm Powell, which disappoints me, but Ross is a scorer, not a standard league guy. Powell, obviously, not in standard league considerations. And my man, DeMario Carroll, hasn't looked awesome himself, so he's still got a little bit of a way to go. He's slid a lot. You can get him around 100, which is fine, but I'm not. You know that I'm not all that high on what's his name, DeMario Carroll, heading into this season. I've been cautious with him, I think, is probably the best way of putting it. The Washington Wizards. I think the biggest story with the Wizards has to be the play of Kelly Oubre Jr. We heard Scotty Brooks come out and say, the small forward position, it's a competition. And we went, come on, look, I got Otto Porter there, and Oubre is coming behind. And Oubre had a terrible rookie season. He was average, I would say, at Summer League. He scored points, but he wasn't great. He's come out and he's averaged 20 points a game in 29 minutes in the first 2 preseason games. He's got 2.5 steals, hit 2 threes, 3 rebounds. He's also shot the ball at 59%, which he's just not going to do. I think that he's a scorer. He's not that sort of defender. He doesn't give you many rebounds and assists. And yeah, if he got the starting job, then, and it's still up in the air. So I don't hate getting Oubre with a last pick and seeing how it plays out, but his fantasy ceiling is not all that high to me. Now, Porter was ranked at like 40 on Yahoo, which is just, it is crazy. If you have any inclination to grab Otto Porter at pick 40, just pack it in now. Just send your entry fee over to the commissioner and go, just have it because I'm done. You shouldn't pick him there. Both of these guys around the 100, 110, 120 mark. Yeah, fine, give it a go. And there is definite risk here with Porter, because Oubre is playing well. Scotty Brooks is obviously not convinced, but Porter's game is more fantasy friendly. He's a better rebounder, he's a better defender, I think he's a better shooter as well, better finisher, high field goal percentage. Oubre has looked great, but I'm not completely buying into it just yet. My boy Tomas Satoransky has looked awesome. He's averaging 36 minutes a game, which is huge, but 9 points, 5.5 rebounds, 6 assists, and 1.5 steals. I love him. Once you get to a deeper league, a 14-16 teamer, I want him. He can play the 1, the 2, the 3. He handles the ball. He plays some defense. He can score. He can hit threes. He hasn't done it yet, but he does hit threes. I really like him in that sense. I like him in Dynasty. He's a better player than Trey Burke. I feel that he's a better player than Oubre and Porter myself. I don't know that will necessarily play out that way or if the Wizards feel that way, but he can do so many different things, Satoransky. So he is someone that you should definitely be paying attention to. Markieff Morris launching a lot of threes. He's averaging 1 3 a game. He said he wants to take more threes this season, and we've definitely seen that so far. So that's something that's, when people come out and say, I want to do this, and then they do it in preseason, you still have a healthy degree of skepticism, but maybe it carries over. We saw it with Boogie Cousins last year. We saw it with Anthony Davis. We saw it with Al Horford. I'm going to shoot threes. Cool. They did, and they continue to do so. So Dwayne Wade, Markieff Morris, is this going to happen with these guys? Marcin Gortat has looked really good. He's played just 23 minutes a game, but 13 and 6. I'm still not high on Gortat, especially around that spot, around the 60s where you need to draft him. If he falls to 100, absolutely knock yourself out. He also didn't have Jan Mahinmi in for both of these games, who's coming from back from a back issue, so that's a concern. And that's my concern with Gortat. He's 32 years old, and they brought in Mahinmi, and that might mean he goes from 29 minutes to 27 minutes, and it drops him from 60th to 100th. Still think he's a really good player. I still think he is better than Mahinmi, but that's my concern. My concern with him at this point. Bradley Beal not playing a huge amount, which we didn't expect. John Wall we haven't seen yet, so yeah, some of these things like Satoransky's assist numbers will obviously drop when John Wall comes back. But it's interesting to see how all this stuff plays out. Jason Smith and Andrew Nicholson, only one game from Nicholson, but he averaged 22 minutes, whereas Smith's at 13 across the two, so probably Nicholson has the advantage there, but again, it's not going to play a huge part in many of your fantasy leagues. I wouldn't imagine anyway. That's it. That's the 15 teams. What we're going to do now is it's time for me to, I haven't done this for a while, time for me to answer your questions. So it's question time. The first question comes from 416 Basketball. Am I crazy to think the Celtics can beat the Cavs? They were already good defensively, and now they added an all-star talent in Horford. I think the Cavs did lose Dellavedova, which you might scoff, but it is significant. J.R. Smith's not there. There is some issue there. Can they beat them? I don't think you're crazy to think they can beat them. I don't think they can beat them, but I don't think you're crazy to think that. So it's not a stupid thing to say. And the Cavs did take a little bit of a hit. Replacing Dellavedova with Geordie McRae is a downgrade, I think. Losing Tim Mozgov for as bad as he was with Chris Anderson, that's a downgrade. If J.R. Smith's not there, it is a concern as well, but I still don't think that the Celtics beat them. Iron Man says, what type of rotation minutes can Sergio Rodriguez, Spanish Chocolate, get this year? Well, I just mentioned that before. Could he be better than Bayless? Absolutely. He's a better distributor. Just watching him is really fun. Like, he's dribbling, he's passing. He's super fun to watch. I think he could easily have better value than Bayless this season. I don't think that that's too much of a stretch. Kyle wanted me to give him some Raptor news. I think I did, Kyle. I hope that was enough Raptor news. Mr. Roll Mr. Lolo. What is Marcus Smart's ceiling? His ceiling is top 50. Does he get there? Probably not. But I think that he should be a top 100 player this season. You've heard me talk about him before. I think 12, 4.5, 4.5 is not crazy. 1.7 steals, 1.5 threes. These aren't ridiculous numbers. I'm big on Smart. I think he's a great pick when you get towards the late rounds. Eric Wong says Dario Saric looks good. What should we expect from him? Touched on that already. I think that he could have a top 100 season. Chances of him getting traded? 0. I can't see any chance that they trade Dario Saric. It just makes no sense to me at all that they would even consider doing that after finally getting him across here. Gabriel says, you said Jabari Parker is the best offensive rebounder in the league. I don't think I ever said that. Maybe I did. Did I ever say Jabari Parker was the best offensive rebounder in the league? I am convinced that I never said that. The best offensive rebounder in the league is Enes Kanter and then Andre Drummond. They're the best 2 offensive rebounders in the league. And he says, what about Tristan Thompson? He's an awesome offensive rebounder. He's right up there as well, and that's a skill that he has. If you're in a league that counts offensive rebounds, Tristan Thompson is definitely someone that you should be paying attention to, and I think that Thompson should be owned in basically every standard league this year. Yeah, he struggles in some areas, but he's a great rebounder, decentish scorer, decent shot blocker, not great, decent, high field goal percentage, manageable free throw percentage, and he should get a bump of 2 or 3 minutes this year. I think that Thompson is a very nice player for those later rounds, but yeah, Jabari Parker, can anyone recall me ever saying that? I don't think I ever said that. Jabari Parker is not a good rebounder at all, let alone offensive rebounder. Kanter, Drummond, Thompson, probably the best 3. The last question comes from Big D. He says, do you think the Magic make the playoffs? No, I do not. Who will be the better value pick in the middle rounds between Aaron Gordon and Evan Fournier? Well, I think that you have to take Fournier earlier, maybe a round earlier, and I think that Fournier is going to give you better value. I think that, and depending on where you get them, it depends on what you classify as value. But Fournier has the better season to me than Gordon. I think he could approach 20 minutes a game. He's going to get more than 20 minutes. I think he could approach 20 points a game, Evan Fournier. I think he scores well. He handles the ball. Secondary ball handler. Without Oladipo there, he gets some more assists. His steal numbers are okay. You'll get maybe 1 or 2 block shots for the entire season, so you don't care about that. But high efficiency, high free throws. Fournier is the guy I've got over Gordon. It might be 10, 15 spots difference between the two, but they're completely different. What do you want? Do you want scoring? Well, you go Fournier. Do you want defense? Do you want blocks? Gordon. Who's going to get more rebounds? Gordon. Who's going to get more steals? Probably Gordon. Who's going to get more assists? Fournier. There's lots of different things you need to consider, but they're definitely in that same mid-round group. But if I'm taking one guy in a vacuum, which again I would never, ever, ever, ever do, you'd never pick anyone in a vacuum, but I'll do it for the purposes of this question, I will take Evan Fournier in that situation. All right, we are done for today's podcast. Again, I will be back with the Western Conference version of this show tomorrow, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, on Google Play, all the places that you can find good podcasts, and leave a review. It's awesome if you can do that. 5 stars would be 2 thumbs up from me. If you could do that, leave a review. It just helps the show get in front of more people. In fact, the mock auction draft podcast we did last week was the most listened to show in Red Rock / Locked On Fantasy Basketball history. So that went absolutely through the roof. So thank you for that. We will be doing a snake mock draft at some point in the next week or so. So stay tuned for that. As always, Twitter, Facebook, you can hit me up for questions. Check out Basketball Monster. You know we've got stacks of content over there for your drafts and for all during the season. And the DFS stuff will be coming soon as well. Fantrax is where you host your league. Listen to the rest of the Locked On network. There's plenty of stuff for us to look at. We're done. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.